pray for good health, but also recognize that if you're not in good enough health to do the job, you shouldn't be doing the job.
Right, and also with that, we've seen many speculating that maybe Biden actually learned of his cancer while he was in office and hid it. And that, in part, because you have folks like one urologist telling News Nation that given the kind of medical care that Biden received in office, he could have known that he had this for a while. Also connected, but really separate from that, you had Donald Trump Jr. questioning when Biden found out about his cancer in a post that also seemingly took a shot at Jill Biden's doctorate in education. With him writing, what I want to know is how did Dr. Jill Biden miss stage 5 metastatic cancer, or is this yet another cover-up? With that post then sparking backlash of its own from people who noted that it's pretty common information that Dr. Jill Biden is not a medical doctor, with many also calling Trump Jr. vile and rude for responding to Biden's cancer with this kind of rhetoric. But also here we saw a general pushback to anyone that's been focusing on cover-up allegations and speculations, with the likes of Meghan McCain, for example, writing, "I don't know if it's just my bias or background, but I don't want to hear anything else about Biden's health cover-up, tell-alls, interviews with staff, etc. Let the Biden family be in peace right now. This is all just so sad and imprudent." And this, as you had others countering claims that Biden may have actually known for a while, with, for example, one medical oncologist at Johns Hopkins telling the Washington Post that it would not be surprising if previous prostate exams failed to show cancer indications as a better test is needed. But then even, all of that, it's just one slice of the backlash that this news has created. Because among other things, you had some people mocking Biden and his illness, or guessing how long he has left. You also had others who disagreed with Biden's policies, just refusing to show any sympathy or rooting for the cancer. With, for example, journalist Taylor Lorenz getting some heat for writing things like, "Hopefully he rots in hell and rests in piss," and saying Democrats have zero sympathy for the countless people Biden harmed and killed during his administration, but want to act like his cancer diagnosis means he's beyond critique for those actions. And that, as you had other commentators in the space like Hassan Piker facing backlash for joking about the news by, for example, sharing a headline about Biden's cancer diagnosis and writing, "He's running in 2028, with him then later adding the mainstream media is already actively laundering the reputation of a war criminal who oversaw the genocide of Palestinians whose selfish nature allowed Trump to win a second term. Joe Biden is an awful monster. Prostate cancer doesn't change that." And so with that, while you had some supporting their words, you had many slamming what Taylor and Hassan said and thinking that it's insensitive to post comments like that at this time. With some reacting with takes like Marjorie Taylor Greene prays for Joe Biden's cancer recovery while Hassan Piker gloats and celebrates. As well as, maybe let's not play partisan games with a cancer diagnosis, okay? Joe Biden is a public servant. He deserves an opportunity to rest, be with his family, and have a fighting chance at recovery. Just be normal and pray for him. With all that said, as this news is playing out on several different fronts in several different ways, I gotta ask you, where are you landing right now? Right? I mean that whether it be the timing of this announcement in relation to the big book release, the controversy and speculation around did or did they not know before this announcement, as well as, just all the different reactions to this news, whether it be people sad and saying, leave the Bidens alone, or those that are celebrating and mocking. Any and all thoughts you have on that, I'd love to see in those comments down below, and we may talk about it more on tomorrow's commentary. But then from that, next up, we've got to talk about how a Mexican Navy ship crashed into the Brooklyn Bridge in New York City. Because while information is still coming in, there are a number of unanswered questions. What we do know is that 2 crew members that were aboard the ship have died and more than 20 others have been injured. We've also seen a ton of videos of the crash from every conceivable angle circulating online, with every single one of them just being horrifying. And as far as what we know, the ship in question is called the Cuauhtémoc. It was on a goodwill tour with plans to stop in places like New York, Jamaica, Spain, London, and way more. In fact, the AP reported that the schedule included visits to 22 ports and 15 nations over 254 days, with 170 of them being at sea. And as far as what happened in New York, contrary to what some have said, the Cuauhtémoc didn't actually arrive in New York on Sunday. Instead, it actually arrived in New York on May 13th, and it was open to visitors for a few days. With the plan then being for the ship to push off from Pier 17 Saturday night, head south, and set sail out of the New York harbor with a stop in Brooklyn to refuel before heading to Iceland. However, when they left the pier, it started moving in the wrong direction, going backwards towards the Brooklyn Bridge behind it, with then the top of the ship's mast running into the bottom of the bridge and breaking like twigs as the ship just kept moving. And at the time of the crash, there were 277 people on board, with many left dangling from the damaged masts and harnesses. And of those 22 people who were injured, according to Mexican naval officials, 11 of those are in critical condition. Also, contrary to what some have been saying online, there were reportedly no injuries from people on the bridge, and the bridge itself didn't take any structural damage, and all the lanes across were reopened after a brief closure following the crash. And then afterwards, as far as the Cuauhtémoc, it was moved further up the East River and docked at a different pier. Also, as far as reactions, you had both New York Mayor Adams and the Mexican president putting out statements about the crash, thanking first responders, expressing condolences about those who died, and promising more information as investigations unfold. But of course, one of the biggest questions right now is how the hell could this possibly happen? And again, while we want more information to come in, according to a preliminary investigation, the ship quote, experienced a mechanical malfunction. With then an unnamed senior city official familiar with the investigation reportedly telling CNN it was the current that took it under the bridge. It wasn't supposed to be headed in that direction, and adding they had some sort of mechanical issue. They lost power, so without being able to use the rudder, they could not steer. But again, very important to note that those are just preliminary findings and obviously subject to change as the National Transportation Safety Board, the NYPD, and the Mexican government investigate further. But then, shifting gears from that to different news, we've got to talk about this horrifying IVF clinic bombing, the heroes who reacted to it, and the downright bizarre motivations of the guy who allegedly did it.
This is probably one of the largest bombing investigations that we've had in Southern California. Make no mistake, this is an intentional act of terrorism.
Right, so at around 11 a.m. Saturday, a car bomb reportedly detonated outside the American Reproductive Center, which is an IVF clinic in Palm Springs. With this enormous blast shattering windows 3 blocks away, and it was even felt in the town over, with some saying they thought it was an earthquake. But miraculously, although it damaged the clinic's office space, the explosion reportedly left the actual lab unharmed. And according to police, an FBI agent and a firefighter rushed into the building, which at the time appeared to be on the brink of collapse, to save the embryos and medical records. Right, because even if they're intact, the embryos could still die if the refrigeration system's disrupted. And then of course, losing the records, it could destroy the dreams of aspiring parents who spent months or years, not to mention tens of thousands of dollars, trying to have a baby. And so this pair, who many are calling heroes, they reportedly confirmed that the fridges were functioning and emerged carrying paperwork to safety. Also, while several people were reportedly injured, fortunately, the only fatality appears to be the suspected bomber himself. And as far as what we know about him, reportedly he was 25 years old, he was former military, he tried to live stream the attack, and according to police, he acted alone. But what's really striking about his profile is his stated motivations. Because apparently he left behind writings in which he identifies as a pro-mortalist, which if you don't know it, basically means that he believed in bringing about his own and others' deaths as quickly as possible to prevent your future suffering, and more importantly, the suffering your existence will cause to all other sentient beings. With him saying, understand your death is already a guarantee, all a pro-mortalist is saying is, let's make it happen sooner rather than later to prevent your future suffering. With him then also adding in an audio recording. Basically, it just comes down to, I'm angry that I exist and that, nobody got my consent to bring me here. And then of IVF clinics specifically, he said, these are people who are having kids after they've sat there and thought about it, and asking how much more stupid can it get? But ultimately, while we wait for more information, that is what we know about one of the more disturbing terror attacks we've seen recently. Though fortunately, the only person this monster was able to take out was himself. So while I'm horrified and saddened and hope that the victims of this attack, they recover from their injuries, there is one less monster on this planet. Then, to shift gears from that, if you are in or near Louisiana, and I don't know, you want to have like a side hobby that kind of brings in a little extra money, the economy is weird right now. Right now, you could win up to $140,000. And all you gotta do is catch 7 escaped violent criminals who are considered armed and dangerous. Because while initially there were 10 of them, 3 were quickly caught, and the FBI, ATF, and Crime Stoppers are offering $20,000 each for the remaining ones. And they're offering this cash because reportedly Friday, when deputies the New Orleans Parish Jail did their routine head count, they discovered that the men were missing. And apparently, the escapees were having some fun with this because they reportedly left parting messages on the wall like, catch us when you can, a smiley face with its tongue out, and too easy, LOL, with an arrow pointing to the hole. And as far as what actually went down, according to the authorities, the breakout occurred the previous night while everyone was supposed to be asleep. The inmates allegedly just yanking their sliding cell door off its tracks at around 12:23 a.m. and then sneaking into a neighboring handicap cell. Meanwhile, a civilian employee who should have seen them had reportedly left to get food. Also, notably, even after moving the toilet, the inmates shouldn't have been able to actually get through the hole since there's usually a crosshatch of metal bars combined with metal plumbing bolted into the concrete. But according to authorities, somehow at least one steel bar protecting plumbing fixtures appeared to have been intentionally cut using a tool. And so one by one, it's believed they squeezed through, then making their way to a door by the docks where supplies are brought in, and then they scaled a jail wall using blankets to cover the razor wire. With them then allegedly running across 9 lanes of Interstate 10, stripping off their jail uniforms, and making off into the night. And with this, a big thing is while the police are looking for these men, they also suspect that others may be involved, even including within law enforcement.
We have indication that these detainees received assistance in their escape from individuals inside of our department. It's almost impossible, not completely, but almost impossible for anybody to get out of this facility without help from the outside.
So right now, reportedly 3 sheriff's office employees have been put on administrative leave, and you have the FBI believing that more people are still helping the inmates evade capture. All of which is very concerning, especially because these seem to be some really bad guys. More than half of the escapees are either charged with or convicted of murder or attempted murder, and the rest are accused of armed robbery, aggravated assault, and numerous gun crimes. So at least a dozen law enforcement agencies, including the FBI and U.S. Marshals, have spent the weekend hunting for them. And with that, you had state troopers IDing one man through facial recognition software in the French Quarter about 3 miles from the jail, with him hiding under a car in a hotel parking garage and catching him after a brief foot chase on Friday. And then, later that same day, you had police saying they caught 2 more, but no more